thank a couple people. We want to thank the city for giving us the facility to use tonight. Thanks to Aaron. We're broadcasting on Channel 20, and thanks to Chris Evans, who is our moderator tonight and is also live streaming on the Guthrie News page. And to Jeff Taylor, our wonderful councilman and the chair of the Logan County Republican Party. I wanted to give you a couple dates that you can put on your calendar for down the road. Thursday the 14th, we have an open forum for State Question 788, Medical Marijuana Question. That event will be held at the State Territory Museum at 6 o'clock this Thursday, so come hear that. We're going to have both sides speaking. On the 18th, we're going to have the House District 31 and Senate Seat 20 open forum will also be here. And the Democratic primary open forum will be on the 21st at the Sports Museum across the street. So keep those dates in mind, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and he's going to tell you what's going on.
Appreciate everyone join us here in Oklahoma's first state capitol here in Guthrie, Oklahoma. A lot of familiar faces. Good to see you all here again. We got some great candidates. We appreciate all of them making their way here so we can hear them and their ideas as we move forward in the primary election and then all the way to November. First up, we'd like to introduce our state superintendent candidate, Ms. Linda Murphy. We invited Joy Hoffmeister, as she declined her offer to be here tonight, but we do appreciate you being here tonight, Ms. Linda. First, if you would please introduce yourself and what compelled you to seek office and your vision for the office.
Okay, I'm Linda Murphy. I'm from Edmond, and my husband Dan is with me tonight back here in the back. He is from Guthrie, born and raised here, and graduated from high school. My son Derek here on the front row. And we're just glad to be here tonight and have this opportunity to share my vision for education. My basic platform, I'm going to make it short and sweet. I think we have about 5 minutes, right?
As long as you need, yeah.
Okay. Local control is number one. We need local control of education. We've had too much top-down control. Too many experiments have been ran through our schools, our classrooms. Right now, we have nationalized testing that our current state superintendent, Joy Hoffmeister, has put into place. And nationalized testing is controlled by the federal government. That is not the way we should be going. When we repealed Common Core state standards in 2014, we passed a law that repealed them from our law. They were not controlled by us. We had copyrighted standards controlled through the federal government and the National Governors Association. It's a strange mix, but that's what it was. So when we passed that law, and I worked with legislators on that law, when we passed it, we put into the law that we would have new testing aligned to the standards we write. So our standards have been rewritten, but instead of contracting for a test that we own, we control, and we contract to a company or maybe one of our universities or another university out of state, there are different ways to do it. Instead of doing that, what we have is nationalized testing. And you can talk with teachers, you can talk with parents, getting these scores back. Right now, for the last 2 years, test scores have been low. And some superintendents are telling their public that they know their curriculum is not aligned to the tests. In other words, you've got to teach what is going to be tested or you're not going to pass the test. It's not just teaching to the test, but knowing what you need to be teaching so students will pass the test that they're given. So had we done what the law said, where the standards are written, then the curriculum would be according to what the standards are. The standards are like goals. Third graders will read on this level of comprehension, you know, in all the different subject areas. But instead of that being aligned, we've got the standards rewritten, and we've got testing that does not match. So that is not local control. The federal government gives us 10% or less. Some schools it's about 7% of the money that they receive. Why should they control the system? Because the testing drives the system. When you've got to align what you teach to pass the test, you're really controlling the entire classroom effort in that situation. So that's a big problem. Local control, it's LEARN, L-E-A-R-N. L is local control. E is education excellence. And we will have education excellence when we have local control and when we allow teachers that know how to teach to teach. Too many of them are required to follow processes, methods, materials that often they know right up front is not going to get the results that they can get with the students. Teachers who have been highly successful have been told in some of the schools that they're not effective anymore because they're not following the new process. Sometimes a new process isn't better, and people who are experienced teachers need to be making decisions about what they teach and how they teach according to state standards and guidelines. So there is a control there from the state, but it makes sense to have some goals and standards. Okay, so education excellence comes from one student at a time doing their individual best, and teachers working with the students to motivate them, encourage them, and challenge them to set those high standards, but to help them achieve. That's education excellence. It doesn't come in some big top-down plan. That's never worked. We've spent billions of dollars doing that without any proven success from the federal level or even really the state level. So that's E, education excellence. Academic standards we've talked about. That's part of the picture. R is return money to the classroom. We need to pay teachers the salaries that are competitive with other states around us. We need to tell them the truth about where we are financially, and that's one thing I have not seen our current state superintendent doing. During the recent walkout, we saw our state superintendent, I believe, a great lack of leadership when we saw the OEA holding the mic at the end of 9 days of a walkout when the teachers had actually gotten a raise before they walked out. And there wasn't more money sitting there waiting to be given somewhere. It didn't exist. So it led teachers down a road that was a false hope, and it was discouraging to many of them. So returning money to the classroom, teacher salaries, very important. And the materials and methods and things that they need to succeed in the classroom, those should be paid for as part of the job and not out of their pocketbook, out of their smaller salaries. We certainly know that is true. Now, it's not a problem in every school, so we need to look at this, and we've got to look at money locally, not just on the state level. I heard a lot of complaints that went out on national media saying my classroom is leaky. We have mold in my classroom, things like that, about the building and the structure. Those are not state funding issues. Those are local funding issues. So if your local school hasn't passed a bond to improve the building or build a new building when needed or repair the roof, those are not state funding issues. And we need to make clear where the money comes from and where it's going. At the state level, we need to look at the State Department of Ed. There's an awful lot of bureaucracy built up over the years. And we've never elected a Republican who went in there and did the complete evaluation of what's going on from the top to the bottom and see how much of this regulation we can cut out. We have a president that I do believe really does want local control of education. Now, I don't agree with the Secretary of Ed right now and what she has, I don't believe she understands public education. Okay, I'll just be as nice as possible because I do support President Trump. And I believe a good school superintendent, Republican, really any school superintendent, but as a Republican, I could go to Washington with the governor and we can get some things deregulated for our state and really get on that track to local control. We can block grant money back to our state. This has been talked about for 30 years in Washington. We've got military impact aid that has got to go to the military school or the schools around military bases. So that's federal money. We've got other federal money that goes to Indian tribes for education. So there is some federal money in education that needs to come to our state and some other money, but it can be block granted and get out of that regulation. I've got some superintendents that tell me, if you're elected, I will work with you to do that, because if I can get rid of administrative cost in my school from all the federal reports and entanglements that we have to deal with, he said, I can give up, several of them said, I can give up the federal money if I don't even get it. It will cost me less to operate my school with all the deregulation, because that's where a lot of the administrative cost is. So that's R, and the fifth letter is N. Now is the time. When I saw the lack of leadership at the state capitol and how that costs not just the classroom and the students and the parents who had to know what to do with their children for a couple of weeks. Not only that, but other services that were needing to get in and talk to legislators and have their day in the state capitol. I know our Federation of Republican Women's Club had a meeting that was canceled, but you know, a lot of people across the state paid a price for that situation. I don't blame the teachers. I'm with the teachers, but I do believe that we need to educate people about education and about funding and the politics of education and work together. And if we have people of goodwill to do that, it can happen.
You just answered all my questions.
I did?
No.
Okay.
I do have some, and all these questions
Okay.
are submitted by citizens, too.
Sure.
Do you believe Oklahoma school districts spend too much on administration? If so, what is your solution?
I think it's in pockets around the state. One that I point to quickly is Tulsa Public Schools. The superintendent there makes $374,000 a year, one person. There's an administrative layer that she's added on top of principals that are to guide the principals because she has a new plan for education in Tulsa. 36% of the students in Tulsa 4th grade are on grade level in reading, 36%. That's their own report. Next year, I'm told by teachers in the system who support me that they've been told by their principals that at the end of next school year, they will be fully online, even with elementary, kindergarten, 1st grade, all the way up, online, testing and learning to read and all of these subject areas. A lot of children don't learn to read well online. I'm not saying it's not a good tool, but we need good teachers in the classroom. And so we've got some problems, and the cost of that is tremendous, technology, but they've passed hundreds of millions of dollars in bonds there. So I think we've got a lot of things that should not be praised as they have been, but should be pointed out as costly and not the best results. That's an experiment too. We don't have any proven results from that kind of a change in a system-wide change. I started into the political arena in 1994. I ran against Sandy Garrett and got 49.5% of the vote statewide. And the issue at that time was outcomes-based education. We got it all over again with Common Core. So that's when I stepped back in and said, I'd rather fight this and expose this and talk about it and get some facts out on the table than to just sit back and watch it happen. So we did get it repealed. I worked with other people around the state. So I have a grassroots campaign now doing the same thing in this race. It's a grassroots individuals because this is about getting someone in that office that represents the people, not beholding to special interest groups.
I want to remind you, if anybody in the audience has a question, we do have index cards here. You can write that question down and bring it up to the table. Next question. Are you willing to allow smaller schools to help the cost of education, or maybe somehow remove some small districts because of the cost?
Well, I think we've got to be real careful that we don't, so to speak, throw the baby out with the bathwater. We've got a lot of wonderful schools that aren't very big, and we can show in some cases that it doesn't cost more to keep them operating than it does to consolidate and transport the kids to a different district. Now, that's not true everywhere. We've just got to get some real data from the local district as well as the state and look at this and do some comparisons. I know of a situation where I know both of these superintendents and I know their districts, and they both have about the same size, very small schools. One of them makes twice as much as the other. One makes $85,000, the other makes $160,000. So there's some disparity there that I think we can report out in a nice way, and if they know this is going to expose, you know, they're the one that makes 2 or 3 times more than others in similar situations, then we can get that under control. But as far as what one law would we pass, there's not a one-size-fits-all. And I think that's where we've made a mistake as Republicans over and over again, trying to pass a one-size-fits-all law to make it all work. And then you end up doing harm instead of good everywhere. You do some harm.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Next question. What is your stance on school vouchers and on charter schools?
Well, I've always opposed school vouchers because I don't want to see government money, which school vouchers, if you don't know, it's taking the government public school money and giving it to parents or to private schools, to homeschooling, to different private situations. I don't know why people who support that want to believe there will never be any government regulation with that. Because when you take government money, you will get government regulation. You might not up front, but at some point you're going to. And I want to see public education funded and funded well. I think it ends up costing us in a lot of ways, in ways that are not beneficial to the overall good of education. Our state constitution gives public education as a freedom in our state. It's provided for in the state constitution, free public education. And the Enabling Act was passed before statehood by Congress to allow schools to be set up with funding that would be a permanent trust in our state. We made an agreement with the federal government, and the revenue and the interest off of the trust land and the money, if the land is sold, then the money that comes from that trust stays, but the interest and the revenue is to go to the schools. It goes to higher ed, part of it, some of the early universities that were here from the beginning, and it goes to K-12 as well. Last year, only 45% of that money went to education. All of it belongs to education. So when we're needing money, we've got to get into that.
Thank you. Next question. Are 4-day school weeks good for children and their education?
Well, I think overall, no. And I think it gives a bad public image to our state that we're not educating. But it's mainly about the child, and are they learning well, and is it working well, you know, for them to advance academically. I think overall, most schools would choose not to do that. I know a couple of superintendents told me they went to 4 days for part of the year, and they get counted in that 4-day group, but they really don't have 4 days all year. They told me, Linda, it's because of the testing schedule. The last 2 months of the year after we've done the testing is just kind of dead time. Maybe not 2 months, but a month and a half. And so we go to a 4-day week then. In other words, again, it's the testing. The testing needs to be pre and post. It needs to be simple, and the test should give feedback to the teachers, the parents, and the students. And what we're getting back for the last 2 years does not tell you how they're really doing in reading or math or science. It's a pass or fail. You are proficient or you're not, or you're advanced proficient, or you're below proficient. Well, what does that mean? That's an arbitrary term. Depends on where you draw the line and what you mean by that. So it really doesn't even tell us anything, and we're paying millions of dollars for that.
Thank you. Have a question from the audience. If we don't give standardized tests from the federal government, how will we know how our children are performing compared to other states?
Okay, the NAEP, the National Assessment of Education Progress, is a test that traditionally for years since the 60s has been used like a spot check. But it wasn't the test that the state gave for all students academically. It was just a spot check, random. And we can do that. And we can also purchase standardized tests that we contract for, like the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. That test is norm referenced, meaning there is a national norm there. It's been given for maybe 40, 50 years. I'm not sure exactly how old, but for a long time. It's academic, and from that comparison, we can see how students are doing compared nationally.
Thank you. Next question, your stand on OEA.
Well, I believe that the OEA, the AFT, which is a branch of the AFL-CIO union, that teachers can belong to those organizations if they choose. I understand why people do, but I am saying about the OEA that they should not be controlling what happens at the state capitol for days and days and days. Certainly they have a role if people are members and they want to be there to represent their membership. That's not the issue. But I think we all saw this went into an extensive, long period of time with an excessive amount of attention given to that one organization, and they don't even have most of the teachers. There's another organization as well, Professional Oklahoma Educators. So there are 3 that I know of that are teacher organizations. So, you know, the OEA shouldn't run what happens in education, no.
Where do you stand on sex ed in elementary, junior high, and high schools? Do you support teaching abstinence? And how do you define the family unit?
Well, this is something that we get with local control. If we have local control, then a local community has its own values. It has its own desire for what they want their children to be taught, their curriculum. And if there are controversial things in curriculum that's determined, there should be an opt-out policy where you don't, actually an opt-in is the best for controversial issues. If you have a third grader and there's going to be a sex education program and you've looked at it, this is another thing. It should be evaluated by parents before it's given to the students. There's a way to do this where we can have some sex education at some level. Well, what do you mean by it? That's an often big term that is often misappropriated, I think. So if parents know what's in the curriculum and they opt their child into that, or they don't and the child is not in that program, that makes a huge difference. I've seen some that are very good for health. You know, there are diseases that children can get when they're ignorant as to what's going on, but most parents I know want to teach their own children about this area, and it gets into a spiritual area for people as well. So we don't want a situation, again, local control. If we don't have local control, what is in that curriculum that's being delivered via computer? And especially if it's individualized, you don't really know what all is in curriculum because you're not able to sit and see every issue or item or concept that's being presented. And if it's individualized, you certainly can't do that. The teacher can't. You've got 20, 30 kids, and you can't see everything every one of them sees on a computer screen. So again, I think we just need to be careful and take responsibility on the local level.
One final question, unless there's another question brought up here. If elected to state superintendent office, what's your first message to the legislature and the governor?
Well, I'm here to work with you, and we need to get some solutions to the problems. I'm here with goodwill to work together, and I have some ideas, and I want to bring those to the table and listen to the other ideas and, you know, do a part as a public representative from the Department of Education to the budget process and to the other issues that are concerned with the finance and the policy regarding changes in education, whatever they may be. I think we try to get too much state mandating sometimes, and we're trying to solve problems. I think it's a good intended purpose, but we need to let educators make more of these decisions and hold people accountable too. We can hold people accountable, but the way we've been doing it is not working, and we need to change that and respect the teachers that are good teachers and let them be the examples.
I'd like to give you a final closing statement, share anything that you'd like to share with the voters.
Well, I just thank you for the opportunity, and if you will go to my website, votelindamurphy.com, share that with your friends, family, relatives, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. If you want to find me on Facebook, I'm there. You know, we have conversations there sometimes as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. On September 17th, we're going to have the final open forum. That'll have both, it'll be after the primaries, so we'll have both Republican and Democratic candidates there. So get that on your calendar now, September 17th. It's a Monday. It'll be at Guthrie High School.
Next will be our district attorney for Logan and Payne County. And I'd like to bring up Ms. Jill Oakes-Tons. We did invite incumbent Laura Austin Thomas, but she declined to be here this evening. Jill, first off, would you please introduce yourself? What compelled you to seek office and your vision for the office?
First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Jill Taunts. I am from Guthrie. I like to tell people I was born in Guthrie and raised in Guthrie, but I was also raised in Stillwater, so I cut my teeth in both of those counties. I worked as an assistant district attorney under the former district attorney, Robert L. Hudson. He wrote me a letter to go to law school and then gave me my first job. I worked for 6 months doing misdemeanors, and I worked my tail off to where I was promoted to be the lead prosecuting attorney for sex crimes, child pornography, child abuse, domestic violence, or any kind of major crime in those areas. And that was probably the highlight of my career, was doing those types of crimes. I also was, I say blessed, because working with victims is one of the best parts about that job. And I was blessed to handle the State v. Darrell Williams jury trial, which was a 3-week-long jury trial that I handled by myself as the lead prosecutor. So that was kind of the highlight of my career. Loved doing that, but I also had to take a break from that. Handling sex crimes is one of the toughest things you can do as a prosecutor, but it is also the most rewarding. So for the past 5 years, I've had a family practice where I do primarily juvenile law, where I was the court-appointed special advocate attorney of the year for 2 years for my advocacy for children of child abuse and neglect. And I see a former member of the Department of Human Services local division who I worked with in those cases. But that's kind of my background. Now to answer your question why I'm running, I didn't forget you. So I was raised where you can do one of two things. You can sit back and you can watch things happen and complain about them, or you can get up and you can do something about them. Being a former prosecutor and caring very deeply for the citizens in these communities, both of them, I live here, my families live here, my nephews live here, my children live here. What I saw happening over the last 3 years compelled me to run. And so in doing that, some of the things that I saw 23 different assistant district attorneys ran through both of these offices in 3 years. That is unheard of in the previous 20 years of this county. I saw at least 9 support staff in Logan County leave in the last 3 years, to where right now we have all new people. I saw the highest number of hung jury trials, which means the state of Oklahoma is presenting a case and a jury cannot come to a verdict of either an acquittal or of guilt, which means that the state has to retry a case again, which costs taxpayer dollars. I think that that can come for many different reasons, but we saw the highest number of hung juries in 3 years in the previous 20 years. I saw the highest number of murder cases just dismissed with no explanation in 3 years. I saw low morale among the employees in both counties, and I saw discontentment and an inability to work efficiently with law enforcement in both counties. Those are things that did not exist when I was in the district attorney's office. It just did not exist. And so our office under Rob Hudson ran efficiently, it ran smoothly, and I believe that I am the type of person and I have the experience necessary, because I have worked in both counties, both offices, which are very different, to restore it back to what it was. And we've got to stop some of these things from happening, and that's why I've ran.
All the questions that are here are submitted by citizens.
Okay.
What would be an alternative that you are willing to apply to drug and alcohol offenses, unpaid fines, and other offenses that are not harmful to the community yet are being incarcerated for?
So what I like to tell people in line with this question is that many people don't know what a district attorney does until you fall on two sides of the coin. You either have been charged with an offense and you're coming to the office as a defendant, or you're coming to the office because you've been the victim of a crime. And included in that, one thing that I would do in almost every case is you have to listen to victims. Even if that's a victim of a property crime, you have to do that. And so no matter what your recommendation would be as an assistant district attorney or a district attorney, you have to listen to victims and you have to get their input. The second thing in regard to, I think you said drug offenses, alcohol offenses, some of what I will call nonviolent offenses that people are being incarcerated for. We cannot ignore that we live in a state today where we have the highest incarceration rate for nonviolent offenses. It is what it is. That comes from the fact that an assistant district attorney has broad leeway and broad authority in all aspects. That means when a police report comes across their desk to charge the crime, which is, as a caveat, why I think we see so many charges either being in hung juries or they're just straight dismissals, is because we're charging in this administration crimes in the incorrect way. We're either overcharging or we're undercharging. And so when we're dealing with nonviolent offenses, we have to look at the whole picture. What led this person to get in trouble? Sometimes somebody's picked up on a property crime, but there's a substance abuse issue. And so what I would like to do, if elected to the office of district attorney, is formulate an interpersonnel memorandum that we would hand out to either the defendant or the defense attorney, asking them to provide some type of background on that defendant. So if this person has a history of mental health, if this person is a veteran that has, post-traumatic stress disorder, whatever it is, we need to know that because we've got to delve to the problem. And I think if we start looking at the problem behind the crime, that will help us better evaluate what type of recommendation or sentence we're going to hand out. Secondly, there is a difference between somebody who wants to get help and somebody who does not. Someone who wants to get help, we've got to provide resources such as mental health courts. That takes a lot of work in our community with service providers. We've got to get together with them, write some grants, and try and get the money to do that. Cleveland County, I think Oklahoma County has one as well. Excellent mental health court programs. Even if we don't have the funds initially, which we're not going to start one of those, the district attorney has the right and the ability to implement within their own office how we're going to handle those types of offenders. And so, we could detail their plea recommendation, if on a plea of guilty, to detail their services to what they need to do in order to correct the condition that hopefully they are not going to come back across our desk. Now, somebody who repeatedly commits a crime, it is what it is. If you are going to be in our society and you're going to continuously commit crimes and have victims and cause, there's all kind of trickle-down effects from that, you're going to be punished. And it is what it is. So I am for smart reform. I believe that victims have a say in what we're going to recommend in certain charges. But certainly, I do believe we've got to try and rehabilitate who we can. But if you're going to recommit offenses, you're going to be punished for that.
Thank you. There's been a lot of turnover with assistant district attorneys in the last year. What will you do to maintain some consistency with your personnel?
Well, I think leadership starts at the top, and I think any public servant should have a servant's heart. We don't do this. It's kind of like law enforcement. Nobody does this job for the money, and you certainly shouldn't do it for the power. You do it because you have a heart to serve, and you love victims, and you care about your communities. If you don't exude that from the top, it's not going to be at the bottom. So I have tried to talk a lot about this turnover because that's just unheard of to me. I loved my job. I went to work every day and I felt like I had a purpose and that we were making a difference in a lot of people's lives. And I think that's how it should be. So I certainly would try and mirror my administration, much like that of Rob Hudson. We had staff meetings. We were like a family. We cared very deeply for each other. We communicated. I will tell you right now that I work even in private practice with both counties and both offices, and the tough thing is trying to express to people what's going on because you guys don't see that, and sometimes you can only see it if you're kind of in the trenches. And what I would tell you is we have a lot of disconnect in both counties, and you would think because they have the same boss, meaning the same district attorney, that both counties would be in board and online with each other, and they're not. And so I would mandate, obviously, extensive training for my employees. I think we would set consistent patterns on how we're going to handle certain types of offenses, how we're going to handle law enforcement. I heard a story the other day that one of our elected officials, who is a sheriff, sat outside of an office for at least 30 minutes before someone spoke with him on an offense. And that is unheard of to me. The district attorney must work hand in hand with law enforcement. If you don't, you're not going to successfully prosecute any crime. And so I can tell you that that would be one of my #1 goals, is to re-implement the relationship between the district attorney and law enforcement, including assistant DAs. And if you have all those things, if people love their job, if people want to come to work and they feel like they're making a difference and they're encouraged, they're gonna stay there. And that's what I plan on doing, and we do not have that right now.
Next question. What factors specifically would you consider in striking a balance between zealous prosecution and needless incarceration?
It goes back to, I think, training your employees. And, for example, I had a case that, and you know, there's been a lot of talk about I'm a defense attorney. My practice in private practice is 75% family law and juvenile law. I do about 25% of criminal practice. I don't think, and by the way, at least 3 of the current assistant DAs were all defense attorneys, because that's kind of what you are if you're not in the DA's office. But that makes you a better prosecutor, and here's why. These people are human beings. None of us are above any of the other ones, and we should all be treated fairly. And I think that you have to look at these people as human beings, not as somebody who comes across your desk on a piece of paper. And I'll be honest, I sent a lot of people to prison, obviously, for harming children. And that's my background and that's my passion, and I won't blink an eye. If you harm a child or you molest a child or you do something like that, I won't bat an eye at sending you to prison. That's just me. I think that's our job as prosecutors, is to protect the public from who we need to protect them from. Now, I had this case where a guy was picked up with marijuana, and the rec from this current administration, and I've got the emails that I sent back in 2015 asking why I've been through 8 different ADAs and why I've been waiting 90 days with no response from anyone in their office. And then I finally, oh, I'm sorry, I should throw this in there. Why someone who had pled guilty to their second robbery charge, where, you know, robbery, you've got 2 actually human being victims, why that person was given a 10 suspended, means paper time, no jail, and my guy, who had picked up a second marijuana charge, simple possession, this was before the state question, his rec was 10 years to do and an $18,000 fine. This is an individual who spent 2 years bettering his life. He had a child, he got caught up on child support, he had a job, he purchased a home, and this administration, even back in 15, would not look at mitigating circumstances around this individual. I ended up doing a blind plea, which, if you don't know a lot about the legal world, is a very scary thing. But I'm so thankful that 2 judges in our district saw through that and gave that guy 4 years of probation time. And, you know, he was certainly rewarded for turning his life around. Those are the types of people that I think the state of Oklahoma is screaming out for, that we've got to give a chance. Now, not everybody's like that. I mean, most people will tell you, I'm pretty tough. So if you want to prove yourself to me that you're going to work hard and you're going to give it a shot and do what you're supposed to do to be an upstanding citizen, I'm going to go down that road with you and give you the opportunity on your first offense. But if you're not, then it's probably not going to look good for you. But we have to look at mitigating evidence if it's presented, which goes back to the form I would like to give out on every offense, because we need to know that as prosecutors what's going on in these individuals' lives. Do they have support systems? Do they have family? You know, what are the things going on? Because we know statistically, if we can get them those resources, we're probably not going to see them again. And if we don't, we're going to see them again for probably the next 5 years. So when looking at zealously prosecuting, it goes towards that argument that I just spoke about, but it also goes towards we have to treat everyone fairly, and we shouldn't be prosecuting cases to get our faces in the paper. Shouldn't be doing press conferences on murder cases as they're pending. We should not be calling newspapers. No offense, Chris, I love you, I know you're in the media.
No problem.
But seriously, when I was under Rob Hudson, we did not notify the news press when we arraigned people for murder charges so that they could come in the courthouse and stand there and video us giving we kept our mouth shut. I mean, you didn't give statements, especially if a case was pending. To me, that's not proper right now. And I want that to stop, because these are serious cases. They are serious issues for the community. They're serious issues for the victims, and they're serious issues, and I think that can actually compromise the integrity of prosecuting those cases. So we need somebody, and I believe I am that person, who's there for the heart of it, that we love it, we want to serve, and we want to do what's right, and I don't think that's going on right now.
What does reform mean to you? We've been hearing a lot about gun control. It's one of many terms that gets thrown around as propaganda, but nobody talks about what it really means to them subjectively as an elected official. What would criminal justice reform look like under your administration?
I am for smart reform, but I am absolutely not for just letting everyone walk out the door. Because here's the thing. Some people who are continuously charged with a crime, it's a game to them. They know they can walk in there, plead guilty to 5 years, are going to do about 28. Sometimes I just heard the other day somebody did 28 days and got turned out. If they know that, where is the bark or the bite, so to speak, in that particular plea agreement. Of course they're going to reoffend because they would rather take that deal than doing services and trying to treat the problem. So it can also be beneficial that we kind of force them to be on probation, so to speak, because we want them to get the help and the resources they need. What we see on TV in criminal justice reform, and I was asked to sign a questionnaire by the ACLU, and I'm not going to sign that. You cannot look at a district attorney's office and have a bright line rule for every case you get. They are very fact specific, and we have to look at the facts surrounding that charge. One of the things that is on that questionnaire that I was asked to sign was, make a pledge to never seek a monetary bond, make a pledge to never seek the death penalty. Well, you tell me, you look in someone's face that someone has raped or murdered a child and tell their family if that's what they want to pursue that you won't do that. I'm not going to do that. That's not my place. And so I think that the philosophy behind it is really great. And yes, there are some things that we need to do differently right now in Oklahoma. There are people in prison for 20 years on nonviolent possession of marijuana. And then we have this state question coming up. So in my opinion, I have always been a supporter of, someone who is truly a threat to our community, who is truly a threat to our societies. They're a threat to my children, your family, your children, your grandchildren. Those are the individuals that I don't mind paying for if they're in jail. And I believe that my administration, well, I know, would pursue down that line of crimes. It is really hard to rehabilitate someone who harms a child or molests a child. It is what it is. Now, mental health, substance abuse, those are the types of things that we can rehabilitate. And if we try that and we do that and it fails, then our only option sometimes is to sentence somebody to incarceration.
Your final thoughts?
First I'd like to thank the Chamber and the Logan County Republican Party and you guys for coming. I think it's very unfortunate that my opponent chose not to come here tonight and debate me. This is a 2-county race. It's Payne County and it's Logan County, and the 2 counties should be treated equally, the same importance. And I can assure you that if I'm elected, Logan County will be treated in the same respect as Payne County. And we've got to start doing that. Again, justice should be blind. I've got an email right now where an elected official called the current administration, made some phone calls, and their niece's criminal charge was dismissed. That is unacceptable. Unacceptable. And our counties and our communities cannot afford to have another 4 years under Laura Thomas. And if you don't know much about this office, I would urge you to reach out to law enforcement, victims, or anybody that has dealings with these offices. And I think that you will be pretty startled by what you learned. I have the experience necessary. My husband owns a power line company, and we manage about 15 employees on that regard. And I have been in private practice. I am familiar with both counties. I am familiar with the judges. I'm familiar with law enforcement, and I know that I can turn this around. And I definitely, again, just can't urge you enough. Reach out and look at these cases. We've had 7, I counted I've got a whole long list, but just since the end of March, just so you know, we've had 7 murder cases, dismissed. And the quote from your current elected district attorney was due to insufficient evidence. Well, let me tell you something. There was a preliminary hearing case, which is what I call a medium level hearing, where a different judge finds whether or not there was probable cause that someone committed a crime and whether or not there was sufficient evidence that that person did commit that crime. That judge bound that person over for trial court arraignment in those cases, meaning a judge found there was sufficient evidence. So we have 2 cases in the last 60 days that were dismissed, sexual battery charges dismissed, and a 2nd-degree rape. So just in 60 days, I mean, if you want to sit down with me, I can give you a whole long more list. But the point being, people aren't charged with 1st-degree murder and it just disappears. That should alarm everyone. And so I urge you to pay attention, Do not read a soundbite. My opponent says that she's been an attorney in the DA's office for 30 years. I will submit to you for 20 of those. She was not in our courthouse, and she was across the street doing admin work, running child support. So I was in the courtroom trying cases. So do not be misled by a soundbite. And that's for any election, any opponent. Do your research and actually talk to people who dealt with them, because facts can be manipulated, or anybody can kind of skew it to be how they want it to be, but you can't change looking online and seeing that these things are being dismissed at an alarmingly high rate. And so the district attorney is an office not of policy, but of action, and it really does protect you guys and your communities and your children. So humbly ask for your vote. My website is www.jilltaunts4da.com. And there are letters of recommendation and more information about myself. And I'm an open book, so if you have a question, get with me.
Thank you.
Our governor candidates, we have 2 that were able to come tonight, so thank you for coming. We just flipped a coin on who's going to go first. We're going to give each candidate 2 minutes as an opening statement, and then for each question, are we doing 2 minutes per question? 2 minutes per question, and then 2-minute closing statement.
We are pleased to have Mr. Kevin Stitt and Mr. Gary Jones join us here in Guthrie. Welcome back, guys. I know you've both been here before early, I believe in March, but welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
First off, will you please introduce yourself and your vision for Oklahoma in the office? And we'll start with you, Kevin.
I love your community, the state's first capital. It's really cool to be back in Guthrie. I've had a blast so far, been all over the state. I'll just kind of tell you my background. I'm not a politician, but really looking forward to the Q&A with everybody today. I grew up in Norman, just down the road, and my dad was a pastor there at Riverside Church. He was there for 30 years, and then I didn't want to go to school in the same hometown I grew up in, so I ended up going to Stillwater for college, went to Oklahoma State. There we go. Was that a Boomer Sooner or a Go Pokes there? I can't. Oh, okay. But got an accounting degree from OSU, and then I moved to Tulsa. And I've always been entrepreneurial. I wanted to have my own business. Met my wife, Sarah, there in Tulsa. I'm so excited she's here. I want to introduce her. The mother of our 6 children is with me over there. So we've been married for 20 years. And I got, just like a lot of entrepreneurs, I got in the mortgage business shortly after college and started my company, Gateway Mortgage Group, with $1,000 in a computer and just a big dream. Today, now we employ 1,200 people. We have offices all over the country. We do business in 41 states. I've got 165 offices. So that's just been my whole background. It's been all about hiring people smarter than me, putting them in the right positions, leading, setting the vision and the strategy. So why am I running for governor? I'm running for governor because I'm just concerned about how our state is. I see all the momentum coming out of these other states as I travel and I visit my different offices. And I look at our state, and we just haven't experienced the growth that these other states had. And then I started checking to our education system, and we're going to 4-day school weeks. And then we've got this budget problem we've been dealing with for the last 6 years. And I feel like that, you know, if we keep electing the same people, I keep looking at the resumes of the people that are running, and it just looks like more of the same to me. I think we'll be in the same situation 8 years from now if we keep electing the same folks that got us in this mess. So that's why I'm running for governor. I want to focus on the next generation, not the next election. And, you know, I want to be the governor for all 4 million Oklahomans and always think about what's best long term. So my vision for the state is for us to be a top 10 state, top 10 in growth, top 10 in education, and top 10 in infrastructure. And I've got a plan to lead us there. It's very similar to how we work in the private sector. So I'm excited to share with you about that a little bit more tonight.
Gary?
Yeah, I'm Gary Jones. I'm the guy that's different. I'm the workhorse. You know, I was born, my dad was in Fort Sill. My dad was a sergeant in the Army, the 7 of his kids. And I will tell you that we learned early the difference between needs and wants. My parents gave everything I ever needed. I learned that list of needs was real small. I went to work in a Mexican restaurant at 14 as a dishwasher. By 15, I was the head night cook. Went to work for Bell Telephone as a telephone operator right out of high school, going to college. I went to UCLA, University of Cameron, Latin America. And I did because I worked full-time for the phone company. At 18, at 20, I was promoted over 120 operators, one of the youngest managers in the history of the company. At 21, I was promoted again and worked on state staff in Oklahoma City in the Office of Planning and Budgets doing independent cost studies. Got married, and moved back to Lawton. As of next Monday, my wife and I will be married 41 years. She taught school for 36 years, 30 years of kindergarten. Being married to me for 41 years and teaching 30 years of kindergarten says she has a tremendous amount of patience. But I will tell you that at 28, I started my own company with a high school kid, built it up to 50 employees. And then in 1994, I was complaining about something being done in government, so I decided to run for county commissioner. Didn't take a penny in campaign contributions, ran against a 10-year incumbent that outspent me 5-1. On election day, I was at the courthouse, and his son-in-law, who's an attorney, I went to high school and college with, wished me luck, and he said he won't get 20% of the vote. He's right, I didn't. I got 53%. What was amazing is when I came into office, I used my business, I've got a degree in business administration and accounting. I used my business skills working in government. We built more bridges in my district, 34, all steel and concrete, than anybody in the history of the state. We had a problem with the county jail. I put a plan together to build a county jail, and I'll talk later because my time's up.
Yes.
12 seconds.
12 seconds. And I'm the best qualified because I'm the guy that fixes things, and I'll talk later. So.
Thank you. Again, all these questions here are have been submitted by citizens. First question, this one is for Gary. We are all aware of the dire situation of the current state budget. Specifically, what revenue streams do you support for correcting the problems, and what is any specific programs would you cut?
Well, someone asked me about a year ago, is the solution to our problem, is it raising revenues or is it cutting expenses? I said it's a combination of both. I'm the author, or not the author, but I'm the one that came up with the plan and went to Democrats and Republicans that gave teachers a pay raise. I believe the gross production tax had been lowered too low. Basically what happened is politicians got behind closed doors with their major donors. They took the gross production tax from 7% to 2%. I said for years that 5% was a reasonable rate. We're still competitive, and it brings money into the system. The next thing I said was the 75-cent tax on cigarettes. What's interesting is that those were two items. This was after A+ failed and after Step Up failed. We had a tremendous problem trying to get teachers a pay raise. They passed pay raises 3 times but never funded it. So I proposed a tax on cigarettes that would, and then also the 2 other plans had proposed a 6-cent tax on gasoline and a 6-cent tax on diesel. What I said was, let's lower the gasoline tax to 3 cents and diesel at 6, which makes it 20 cents across the board, same as Texas. Which means if you don't smoke and you don't own an oil company, if you drive 20,000 miles a year and get 20 miles to the gallon, this teacher pay raise costs you $2.50 a month. 90% of Oklahomans believe that's fair. The other thing that we need to do, and I've been trying to get this done since the day I walked into office, is do more performance audits to make sure that we're doing things cost effectively and efficiently. In my office, we've cut $1.5 million out of our annual expenses. We've gone from 120 employees down to 108. We don't have a chief of staff anymore, a public relations person, a legislative liaison, and we've eliminated 9 administrative assistants. We're doing more work with less people. And that's what we need to do throughout government, is make sure that, Governor Fallin 3 years ago said that we should eliminate 10% of all the non-mission critical expenses. Folks, we should eliminate 100% of all the non-mission critical expenses and make sure that what we're doing goes towards core services, the things we should be doing in government. And between those 2 things, we can balance our budget and run a cost-effective, efficient government.
Kevin.
Yeah, so to me, it comes down to managing the budget, okay? We've got to have accountability, transparency in this $22 billion budget. So what I get frustrated about in all 77 counties, everywhere I go, we have a $22 billion budget. The legislature, though, only gets to control about $7 billion. It's a very small portion of the overall budget. They get to control where the money goes, all right? So we got federal money, and we've got agencies raising fees, and it's disingenuous to all of our taxpayers to talk about just this $7 billion and how it's been cut here or there without showing the entire picture, okay? So I've got a plan to put Oklahoma's checkbook online. We've got a D+ rating in transparency when I look at our checkbook online. We think we have an online portal. It hasn't been updated since 2010. We have got to create the transparency and accountability. There's 120 different agencies in state government. Running state government is more like running a business than anything. I've got 25 call centers. We manage $17 billion in home loans. I've been balancing budgets, putting performance metrics in place my entire career. Folks, until we get control of this, what's going to happen is it's going to continue to happen like what happened to the Department of Health. We're going to take money from this department and spend it here, and it's the squeaky wheels getting the oil. And if you remember, 6 months ago, the Department of Health lost $30 million, okay? Everybody was in a panic mode. Nobody's held accountable. The agency head resigns. He blames the board blames him. They're all blaming each other, right? So they started an investigation. They had to first lay off 200 Oklahomans. 200 Oklahomans lost their job because they couldn't make payroll. They started an investigation. 2 weeks ago, they released the findings of that investigation. You know what they said? They said, we didn't really lose the $30 million. We found the $30 million. It was in a slush fund. It was just called something else, and they didn't know what it was called. I am more confused than ever. Folks, this shouldn't happen. $30 million is a lot of money, and that makes me wonder if it happens in that agency, how many other agencies it happens. So I need the authority as governor, and day one in office, I'm going to ask the legislature for the authority to hire and fire agency heads. Until we have accountability and we run those agencies and I can deliver performance metrics so I know what's happening, we're going to be in the same situation. Because, folks, whether you're the governor or you're the CEO, you can't dig into the weeds on every single issue. That's why it's called transparency. That's why it's called management.
All right. In the same manner a business or a family would have to do, is there any way that candidates can do a department by department and line by line current budget for the state?
Absolutely, yeah, we certainly can. But you know, to me, and everybody talks about audits. We absolutely have to have financial audits, and the auditor's up here with me. He's done a great job. We need to encourage the next auditor to continue to be able to dial in to all the different agencies. But what I talk about is performance audits. This is so different. Most people don't know what I'm talking about. You have to learn how every one of your departments is running and how we have performance numbers, and you have a metric with every department. So the way we do it. I love to give the example. We do home loans. We underwrite home loans. We do about 3,000 home loans a month. So I take my underwriting cost center. I know we're getting in the weeds here, but hang with me. We take our underwriting cost center, we divide it by the number of units we do, and we come up with a number. For us, that's $300. So that's what it costs us for that department to run that department, $300 alone. Well, if you're running that department, you can hire as many underwriters as you want next year. But remember your metrics. So next June, if we're closing 4,000 home loans, you, of course, can hire more. But if we're only closing 2,000, you've actually got to shrink your department. Why is that so important to me? When I look at these 120 agencies, they never shrink. They always think bigger budgets are better outcomes, right? So I ask myself, how many employees did this agency have last year? Some of them have 500 employees. Some of them have 1,000. Some agencies have 2,500 employees. I ask myself, what are the services they're delivering for citizens? Because, folks, we don't have any different issues in Oklahoma than they have in Texas or Kansas or Arkansas. So why are we at the bottom of all the list? And why are we number one in female incarceration? We have the same issues. So I ask myself, with technology, how does the Department of Transportation work in this state versus our state? That's how a business person thinks of things. Folks, I do not have to reinvent Google or Yahoo. I've got to deliver great services through 120 different agencies. I've got to do it effectively and efficiently and provide great services for you, the citizens. The legislature has a tough job. They're looking for leadership, and as governor, I will lead them.
Actually, there's $24 billion budget. The other thing, too, is there's many agencies across the state have been tremendously reduced. And so it's not that. The thing about it is what we have, and let me tell you what happened at the health department. What happened at the health department is they brought in somebody from outside that did not understand government. Brought in a CPA. He said, well, you're using money here that you can't use, and you're going to go to jail if you use it. And you got this money over here within the internal accounting that's not the official accounting, the internal accounting here that says you owe money to yourself. So he said, he came back, and what they did is they asked for the resignation of the head of the health department. The governor appointed somebody else to go in there. And then what they said was, oh, we need $30 million to solve this problem and make payroll. And they came up with a plan to eliminate 200 jobs and say we're going to have to lay these people off. Our people went in there, and yes, we were correct on our audit when we went before. There was no missing money. And what we said was we sent the professionals in our staff that went through and analyzed and determined that they had 52 accounts they hadn't reconciled. And what they determined was they never needed the $30 million. There was never any money missing. There was never any overspent money. It was a case that you brought somebody in that didn't know what they were doing. The governor appointed somebody that didn't know what he was doing. And the next thing you know, they took a situation and made it much worse. And because of the investigation, the grand jury investigation, all the other things that happened, our auditors went in and reconciled 52 different accounts, clear back to 2011, said there was never a point in time that you did not have enough money to make payroll. You had always had at least $7 million. And what the lead auditor said, you could have given them $30 million worth of monopoly money, they would solve the problem. Folks, that's why you need people that know what's going on, know how to do business. I was in business for 26 years, but they also understand the business of government. Because what we found in many cases, we have people coming in that try to apply, and there are matrix put in place. The problem is the matrix don't match up with what's needed.
Thank you, Gary. This question is for you, Gary, here.
Okay.
To go first. Where do you stand on making Oklahoma agriculture better, since agriculture is one of the major revenue generators for our state as well as employees? What will you do to back it and strengthen it?
Well, I'm the only one in this race that's involved in production agriculture. I've been farming and ranching for 40 years. I remember walking through the OSU parade in 2010, and a gentleman in a Model A said, "Son, where do you live?" I said, 7 miles north of Chattanooga. He said, "Get that big fancy job in Oklahoma City. Where are you going to live?" I said, 7 miles north of Chattanooga. You know, I understand the value of agriculture and understand how added value and providing the infrastructure and the programs by which that we can expand agriculture. Agriculture and oil are two of the biggest things in our state, and we need to make sure that we have the environment in order to make sure that we continue that. Maintaining our rural schools. I don't believe in consolidating schools. Those rural schools are the lifeblood of our community out there. We need to make sure that we instill that those schools remain open. Now, we can do things to reduce the administrative costs, and I have a plan to do that. But the whole plan should be about doing the things we can to create the infrastructure and the things that they need in those rural areas to maintain their lifestyle and expand agriculture. A good example is that there's a ranch in eastern Comanche County. It used to be your typical ranch. Now it's an international breeding operation where they bring in cattle from all over the world. And in turn, they're providing high-tech jobs there. Those are the things that we need to do. We need to make sure that we start doing added value to the agriculture products instead of just sending out, the normal things that the raw materials and raw products. And we can do that, but you have to have somebody that understands rural Oklahoma, understands agriculture, and understands the numbers where we can come together and make those investments and make sure that we get a good return on those investments. And I'm the guy that can do that.
Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, so, when I'm out there talking to rural Oklahoma, they want to make sure we have the best infrastructure to get their products to market. We've got the port. We've got a lot of great stuff in our state. We've got to make sure that we continue with the best infrastructure so they can get their products to market. But, we have to talk about diversifying our state. We're so fortunate to have the oil and gas industry, to have the ag industry. But as Oklahomans, what we do know is that those industries go up and they go down, and we live from these different cycles. We have to start diversifying. As a business person, that's what I want to do and I want to lead. I want to take advantage of what's happening nationally. Nationally, there is a move to repatriate dollars. The economy is booming. Manufacturing is coming back to the U.S. I believe we have the opportunity, a great opportunity in Oklahoma, to capture that growth over the next 10 years. I think we are centrally located. We've got the best location of any state in the entire country. We are dead center located in the middle of the U.S. We've got all the land, the natural resources, the utility prices. We should be number one in manufacturing, number one in distribution. We should be number one in aerospace. We just need a pro-growth governor that understands how to talk to CEOs, how to get our state growing again. I'm going to expand commerce. We used to have commerce departments in California and overseas and some of these higher tax states. I think we need to grow that. I'm going to put salespeople in place that are going after, because to me, this is blocking and tackling. Folks, there's not a real secret how to grow your state. There's not a secret on how to start a company with $1,000 in a computer and grow it. It takes hard work and hiring the right people and then working your tail off every single day, and I'll do that as governor.
Next question for Kevin. Was the teacher walkout a success, and your thoughts on the group Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite, who argue against the bill that would increase teacher salaries by an average of $6,100 with the tax increase passed following the teacher walkout this year?
I'm not for any new taxes, okay? And I've said that all along. We have got to have some reform. So I want to get to a point where I can talk about what our plan is for reforming the actual funding formula for state education. But I've also said I don't think we should repeal that. We've got to move forward and look forward into 2019. So my heart breaks for the teachers. I believe we have to pay teachers what market is. Market to me is what they do in Texas and Kansas and Arkansas and Colorado, the states around us. It's called competitive wages. And in any business, if you don't pay competitive wages, you're not going to get the best and brightest, right? You've got to pay that. When I hire underwriters, if I don't pay them market wages, I don't get the best and brightest. So we've got to do that for our teachers. That's one thing, right? But what was so frustrating on that walkout is there was no leadership. Nobody was walking to the microphone with the Teachers Association and calming everybody down. I personally went and met with the Teachers Association to find out what happened. The legislature passed a $420 million increase in education funding. It was a 19.7% increase the week before they walked out. They still walked out. That shows you that nobody was talking. As governor, I would have went to the microphone and said, folks, we didn't get in this mess overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. Here's our plan for 2020 and 2021, and here's how we're going to long-term fix that, which I hope I have time to go into in a future question here. But nobody would let their company go through 2 weeks worth of bad publicity. They would hire PR firms. The CEO would be out in front, be leading, calming everybody down, because instead we let our state go through this bad publicity, which hurts me in 2019 recruiting companies. It's bad PR for our state, and I did not like it.
Gary.
Well, first of all, I proposed the plan on February 15th. You know, the walkout occurred April 2nd. If they had legislature come together and pass that plan, there would not have been a walkout. And what's interesting in my plan, the 5% gross production tax and the 75 cents on cigarettes, 2 days before the step-up plan came up for a vote, Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs and Dr. Coburn came up with a plan that included 5% gross production tax, 75 cents on cigarettes, and then there were some items in there that were not possible and were not going to get passed. So when I put the plan together, I included those two items because I've always been for 5% gross production tax. What's interesting also is that last week, Dr. Coburn had a press conference in Tulsa, and he said that he didn't have a problem with gasoline and diesel tax as long as it went for roads and bridges. Well, guess what, folks? After the first year, the tobacco tax goes toward health care. We can leverage 2-to-1 federal dollars, and that's going to go help our rural hospitals. The gasoline and diesel tax will go toward roads and bridges. It's dedicated. So what we have now is we have a group that is opposing 3 items that at one point in time they actually supported. It's very reasonable. Resetting the gross production tax from 2% up to 5% is not a tax increase. It's a reset of an unreasonable rate. The other 2 items, the tobacco tax goes toward health care in Oklahoma. People that smoke have a higher incidence of health care and cost the state of Oklahoma more money. And the gasoline and diesel tax is a use tax. And so that's very reasonable. So I've said, let's be reasonable and solve the problem. But what we also have to do is make sure that every single dollar we spend goes toward the mission. And we should fund budgets in the manner that we do individual budgets and fund the first budget first. Education should be first, healthcare, transportation, corrections, and every one of those ought to be an individual budget instead of this omnibus budget the way we do it today.
On June 26th, voters will vote on State Question 788, better known as medical marijuana. Many believe this measure will pass and help adults and children with their medical needs, but others believe the ballot measures not only medical marijuana, but recreational marijuana. What is your position on this important matter?
After talking to doctors and seeing patients that need this, I think the time for medical marijuana is now. I don't like the way this bill is worded, but I think the likelihood of it passing is great. And I will make sure that we have mechanisms in place to ensure that it's regulated and doesn't morph into recreational marijuana. I think that's our responsibility to do that. And I will be sitting there with the legislature. I won't wait until swearing in. I'll take this on from day one. And by the time I come in, we'll call a special session and we'll deal with the issue before it goes into effect.
Thank you. Kevin.
Yeah, so I tell people that I'm not going to get in the way between a doctor and their patient. If it's something's good for the patient and it's medicine, then I'm perfectly fine with it. Recreational use is something that I don't think that our state's ready for. I'm not for that. There's too many unintended consequences. It's still illegal federally. Until they change something there, you know, I talk to businesses and how they drug test and what happens then, and the banking system. There's all kinds of unintended consequences that's going on in Colorado that we would not want to put our state through. But I also met with a pain management clinic and the two doctors there, and I was really trying to understand, would you guys prescribe this medicine? And they were like, yes, we would. This would help in some cases. People, instead of getting on opioids, we would prescribe marijuana. They said they would never prescribe the smoking kind because they think that's harmful for the lungs, but they would prescribe it. And so I'm not going to get in the way of a patient and a doctor.
Kevin, your turn here. Question is, where do you stand on the Second Amendment? Will you defend it? And have you ever fired a firearm? And when's the last time you fired a gun?
Yes, I fired a firearm. I'm a huge Second Amendment supporter. I'm a constitutional conservative. I'm going to protect the right to bear arms. You guys want me to show you my pistol? I'm kidding about that. But I actually killed a turtle on Sunday. So I shot a little 22 on Sunday. I took my two little boys fishing, and we saw a turtle right underneath the little dock that we were. Thank you, Sarah. Little dock that we were fishing at, and I was very proud. The first shot went right over it, but the turtle stood there, and then so I would re-aimed and killed my turtle. So yeah, I'm an Oklahoma boy through and through, and I will protect the rights. And I'm a Second Amendment supporter.
Yes, I'm on Second Amendment. My wife and I both have concealed carry. And last time I shot was about a week ago, and I missed him. It was a wild hog from about 400 yards away. But I will tell you that anybody in this room that wants to hunt wild hogs, you're welcome to come to my place, but bring a dozen people. They're great. They're running rampant out there. But no, I think it's our constitutional right to be able to carry and protect ourselves.
All right, thank you. Gary and Kevin, you guys have been all across the state in like many forums like you are here tonight. What topics are you hearing from on the road from citizens that we might not be hearing in these forums?
I'm hearing that people have concerns over the teacher pay raises, that they're concerned they're going to be repealed. Teachers are concerned that they're going to get what was promised. And also the big concern with educators is not just the teacher pay raises, the fact that we've allowed class sizes to get very large. And we haven't given the resources, and we're not given the supplies, and that we need to, that the teacher pay raise needs to be the first step, and that we need to make sure that what we're investing in education, we're getting results from it too. We need to make sure that we have mechanism in place to measure that. But the other thing I'm hearing is the fact that it's amazing to me this idea that let's audit everything. It's the buzzword of this election cycle. What is amazing to me is that in the last 7.5 years, we have done more audits than any time in the history of the state. And what really bothers me is the fact that very few people have any idea how many audits are done, and the fact that the audits that are done, the recommendations we make are being ignored. And that's where, when you do an audit and someone makes recommendations, you need to implement those. About 6 years ago, the Corporation Commission came to us and said, we want to hire internal auditors, but we don't know what they should do. I said, why don't you do this? Let us put embedded auditors in your agency. And we'll come in and do a risk assessment on your entire agency, very large agency, and we'll start doing a series of performance audits that you want. Bob Anthony, every single recommendation we've made, they've implemented. Bob Anthony, this is his 30th year. He said it's the single best thing they've ever done. We've been trying to get this set up to where we could do this on an ongoing basis, on a rotating basis, since I came into office. We've had 4 bills to get it done. The legislature's killed 4 of them. The governor has vetoed another one. We can put a program in place, and we have a great state auditor's office. We can do that. So we can provide those performance audits on a rotating basis in conjunction with the budget process.
Just to give a different type of an answer that we're hearing out there is criminal justice. People are so concerned. I'm so concerned. I mean, as being a guy that's kind of been creating jobs in the private sector, raising my family, I never really knew it was so bad. But now that I've gotten involved, we are #1 in incarceration in the nation, men and women now. Okay, so when you think about it, from a list of 1 to 50 states, if we were 25th, we'd be average, right? But if we're #1, this is low-hanging fruit. This is easy. We are doing something wrong, folks. We're leading in a category we shouldn't. We don't have any different issues in Oklahoma than they have in any other state. And so that's what's so frustrating. Why this hasn't been done, I don't know. We will change that in a state administration. I mean, I've met ladies who got sentenced to 45 years in prison who had the equivalent of $200 worth of drugs. The amount of drugs can fit in the palm of your hand. Then they had Sudafed on her possession. So that they got her for manufacturing, where another state would have given her a year or two. All right, then you got all the unintended consequences, foster care, and all the stuff that goes with incarceration. Just from an economic standpoint, that'll cost us $1 million to incarcerate that person, right? Okay, 70% of Oklahoma's prisons are made up of people like that. People that we're mad at. We're not really afraid of. We're mad at them. And we've got to figure out better outcomes because we incarcerate that group 80 to 100% more than the other states around us. Now, 30% of Oklahoma's prisons are people we're afraid of. And I've got to give the district attorneys, the prosecutors they need to keep those folks in prison. But this group over here, there are better outcomes. The other thing I want to address is fines, fees, and court cost. It is a death spiral for poor people. People get in the system, they can't get out. I will change that. Okay, I've met people along the way now, guys that spent 10 years in prison, served their time. Now they've been out for 10 years, been a plumber. They're still paying off $25,000 in fines, fees, and court costs. Most people give up, and then we reincarcerate them. We want them out paying taxes and working and raising their family and making their truck payment, right? We have got to figure out better outcomes. I'll do that as governor.
Speaking on criminal justice, and this will be for Kevin first. In what way do your conservative principles apply to criminal justice reform? What sort of criminal justice reform would you like to see in Oklahoma?
I mean, I can give you example after example. I mean, I was in Wayne, Oklahoma on Friday night, and we was out there with about 50 people and had a great event. And the lady that was hosting it for me is their horse people down there. And she sent me a letter, and she said, Kevin, just want you to look at this. She said, our son, he's 50 years old. He had a knee surgery in 2015. He got addicted to Oxycontins and then Oxycodone, and he ended up selling a few of those. He got caught, and he was facing 12 to 30 years. He's currently in prison. Day one in office, she sent me the list. He had $1,000 in fines and fees, right? My point is, we are putting people away 80 to 100% more than the states around us. It doesn't make sense. Why 15 years? Why not 14? Why not 10? Why not? You know what I'm saying? So we have to think about that. That is a business principle. I look at market. What are the other states doing? And I don't have to reinvent the wheel here. I have got to deliver great services, these 120 different agencies, and think about how other states are doing it. And when I'm number one in something I'm not supposed to be, I'm going to do something different. As your governor, if I'm number 45 in something, we will do things different until we grow. But we've got to get away some of these minimum sentences. You have to spend 85% of the time, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have to think about how we fund the district attorneys instead of let them make fines that pay for their different deals. So it's a self-serving deal. Anyway, there's so much self-serving, folks, in the government that it's unbelievable. You have to have an independent governor focused on what's best for all 4 million Oklahomans, or we continue to get in this situation where they'll never make a decision against this industry or this special interest group or this group of lobbyists. I will be the governor that focuses on what's best for all 4 million Oklahomans 10 years from now.
Tulsa Ward referred to me as a curmudgeonly penny pincher who doesn't have many friends in high places because I tell it the way I see it. We've done audits on corrections, and we've said that your guards are underpaid. You don't have enough guards. You don't have the programs to treat people for alcohol and drug and mental health. You know, what we need to be doing is, like was mentioned earlier, that we need to have more drug courts. We need to have more mental health courts, more veterans courts. And what we need to do is find programs by which that we punish people, but we don't spend $24,000 to $30,000 a year to house them. And so what we do is we have work programs by which that they can, maybe even sometimes where they come in on weekends, they serve their sentence on weekends, but they stay to take care of their families and they raise their families and they're still taxpayers. You know, when we incarcerate a woman, we also take on the responsibility of taking care of their families. We've got to stop that. In our audit we did is we made multiple recommendations. One audit was done that says that they need to spend about $10 million to put programs in place to start changing this trend. And the legislature says, we don't have $10 million. They paid an outstate firm $900,000, so they put it on the shelf. We can't do that. When people come in with good recommendations of doing things to change things, we need to implement those. And I'm glad, Kevin, you've been around the state seeing this. I've seen this for 7 years. That, you know, someone asked me, said, what is the question? What's the one thing that surprises you at being the Capitol after being there 7.5 years? I said that 7.5 years later, we're still facing the same problems. We're not solving problems. I've taken on additional responsibility of problems at the Capitol that aren't my responsibility and found solutions to those problems. We need somebody that has the ability to identify a problem, work with those and get that problem, you know, find a solution and get it implemented. I've got a history of doing that, and that's what we need to do. I can start doing that from day one. People start talking about draining the swamp, folks. I know where the plug is. We can start draining that swamp on day one.
2 more questions, and this one's for Gary. Of the 120 state agencies, name 5 you will eliminate.
The first thing I will do, we have created this mega agency called OMES, Office of Management and Enterprise Services. They're called OMES. The official term is one big mess. What they've done is they've taken extra layers of bureaucracy and they've called it consolidation. I will take that pig and slaughter it from day one. And we'll break it down into manageable pieces by which that we can manage better. You know, in my office when I came in, we had a vertical structure there. Now people report directly to me. There's like 6 people that report directly to me. We don't have the bottlenecks. And so that's the first one I'll address and have the biggest impact. Then what we will do, we'll take similar agencies and we will truly consolidate them. We did an audit on one agency that was spending $750,000 a year to put on a trade show. And our recommendation was that you need to either consolidate that with another agency or seriously consider whether that needs to be a function of state government. That audit cost $10,000. They're now doing for $250,000. What cost $750,000, they're saving $500,000 a year. But we'll take like agencies and come together and see where the duplication is. You know, I'm a CPA. I know how to do performance. I know how to get results. And we'll step in there and we'll truly start. And I'll lead by example. First thing, one agency I'll eliminate is the Office of Lieutenant Governor. Not the position, but the office. Because what it's become is the campaigner-in-chief. What we'll do if Dana Murphy becomes the lieutenant governor, I'll ask her if she'll become the Secretary of Energy. If Matt Pinnell, he'll make a great Secretary of State. We can eliminate $700,000 a year and have a functioning lieutenant governor instead of somebody that goes around campaigning for 8 years.
Kevin.
The CAFA report says we spend $17 billion. Online, we show $29 billion. It is unbelievable. Nobody can show me real revenue numbers in our state. So you look at Texas. Texas has a 12-year sunset provision. Every 12 years, their agencies get a third-party audit to determine what is the overlap, what is the duplications, and they have to reapply basically for their approval every single 12 years. But folks, so that's what the accountability and transparency we have to have from those different agencies. So then you go back to like what I was talking about before, and you organize the boards and the commissions. We have to have the authority as the governor to be able to remove those agency heads or remove the board members. And in case in point, I met with the chief of staff for Keating, and he said, Kevin, you've got to change one law that will make all the difference. The governor's got to have the authority to remove a board member. Because what happens today, folks, is the governor appoints somebody on a board, and that person is there for 7 years or 9 years, and it's the governor's second term on their way out the door before they even have control of those boards that are hiring the agency heads. And then it's somebody from their own industry. So the own industry, they're self-dealing. They're basically regulating themselves. You see what I'm saying? Until you have the governor, we have the authority to appoint those different agency heads. They just spin the legislature in a circle. So, folks, I've never been in government, and I'm proud of that fact. I think President Trump is doing a great job because he is bringing business principles to the state government, and he's shaking things up. So I love the fact that I come from the business world because I bring a whole fresh set of perspectives. And I don't think in an 0-11 football team, you hire from within. I think you bring people from the outside, and you bring people in to come in to shake things up, and that's what I'll do as governor.
Thank you. Final question, and it's from the audience. It's a good one, and this is for Kevin first. Many people are unsure as to who to vote for. We feel like every politician says the same thing. What sets you apart? Why should we vote for you?
Every 4 years, people get up here and they just talk and they just talk and they just talk and they say everything they're going to do, and then they get nothing done. It's so frustrating. Until you have an independent governor, somebody focused on the next generation and not the next election, and you have an outside business person, we're going to get in the same situation, folks. And, you know, I don't think our forefathers ever envisioned career politicians. They thought somebody would take off from their farm or business and go serve their state. That's my idea of how it should work. And so I'm with you. I met with Steve Largent. He came by my office, and we were talking, and he said, Kevin, I ran for governor 15 years ago, and we're talking about the same issues today as we did back when I ran. We haven't done anything about them. Folks, I'm going to be the governor that does something about them. That's why you want to vote for me, is because the state administration will move us forward to be top 10 in growth, top 10 in education, and top 10 in infrastructure.
Gary.
I have a history in every job I've ever had. I've had people come into my office. I had a gentleman come into my office about 3 years ago and said, I'm a Democrat. I've never voted for a Republican in my life, but I want to shake your hand because you've done everything you said you're going to do. What we need is somebody that can work together across the aisle and come together and work on issues and not play politics with it. I've never had a political hire in my office. Not one person has been hired because of politics. They've been hired because of their capabilities, their qualifications. The big problem we have right now is that what happens is somebody gets elected and they hire their campaign manager, put them in a position they're not qualified for. They hire their campaign consultant, and then they start putting the people that contribute to their campaigns, put them on boards and commissions. Folks, that you're setting yourself up for failure. Every single person I've hired has been a capable, competent person. They have at least 5 years experience or 10 years experience in accounting, or they have an accounting degree. Never once have I had a political hire. And so subsequently, we're getting more done. We've taken on problems. We've solved. I'm the guy that's different because, number one, I don't placate to the special interest groups. My special interest is the people of Oklahoma. And folks, I will tell you that not only do I have a history of success in the private sector, I've also got a history of getting things done within the government realm. And that's what we need, is somebody that understands, the way things work in business is one thing, but the way they work within a government environment is another. You need somebody that understands both, and somebody that's willing to do the things necessary to move this state forward. I've got 3 special interests. Those of you that know me know that I have the 3 most beautiful, intelligent grandkids in the world. Yours are somewhere behind mine, but every decision I'll make will be about the future of those grandkids, and that's what we need, is somebody that is truly looking toward that next generation. And every single position I've ever had, people will tell you that I've done exactly what I said I'm going to do, and I've actually delivered more than what anybody expected.
I know it's a crazy schedule, and it will be for the next 2 weeks as well, but we appreciate you guys making Guthrie a destination. All right, we'll let Gary begin the final remarks here. Again, 2 minutes each for both of you.
I literally prayed that somebody else would run for governor that I thought that truly understood what's going on, had a plan to fix it, and had the intestinal fortitude to get it done. There's a whole lot of people that want to be governor. But Mike, I really wonder whether or not there's people that truly understand the magnitude of what we're facing, and we're willing to do that. I do. And I will tell you that I've always treated this race as a marathon. I've never had a race where I've run that I had nearly as much money as my opponent. I'm running based on my track record, what I've been able to accomplish, whether it was chairman of the Republican Party, state auditor, county commissioner. I'm running on what capabilities I have. And I tell you, it's funny because there's multiple people around the state that said, Gary, we know you'd make the best governor, but you don't have $2 million, so you can't win. This is a marathon. And folks, I've treated it as that, and I will tell you what, people spend $2 million to run their poll numbers up and say, look, the other guy can't win. That's not true, because on election day, everybody counts one. And what we found now is I've gone from 6th to 4th, and I'm moving. Folks, I'm coming up on the outside, and I'm getting a tremendous amount of support. And folks, what we need is somebody that is indebted to you, the people of Oklahoma, and somebody that has that track record of doing what's necessary. And I've got that, and I believe on June 26th, I'm going to be one of the 2 people that's going to be in the runoff. But I need your support, I need your help, and I'll be available to hand out signs and talk to you afterwards. So thank you very much for being here, and let's move on to June 28th. I only care about one poll. That poll is June 26th, and that's the one I'm going to win. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Kevin.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. It's an honor to be with you, and what I've learned across all 77 counties is people are frustrated. They're frustrated with the status quo. We're frustrated with coming in 45th in education, and we're frustrated being #1 in incarceration, and that's what I get excited about, because we do not have any different issues than any other state does. It's ridiculous that we're at the bottom of these categories. I want to lead us to be top 10. And day 1 in office, I'm going to end politics as usual. There's so much self-interest and self-dealing that happens in the good old boy system. I will shine a light on that, and I will be representing what's best for all 4 million Oklahomans, because we can make the right decisions, folks. We know what they are. I've got 49 other examples of how to do it, and I will do that. And then I think, secondly, you need a governor that can take advantage of what's happening nationally with the economy. The Trump tax cuts are working. There's a move to repatriate dollars and bring manufacturing back to the U.S. success. You just need a governor that understands businesses, and you're hiring a chief executive officer that people want to meet with, and I will go out just like I've done in the private sector, and I will help grow our economy. And then third thing is you have to have somebody that can run the budget. Folks, we're hiring people normally who've never even signed the front of a paycheck or balanced budgets or set strategy or manage the change curve. This is leadership. This is getting people to work together and getting the legislature to act. This is what we do in the private sector. It's what I've been doing my whole career, folks. There's not a book on how to turn your state around. There's not a book on how to start a company with $1,000 in a computer and grow it either. And then the last thing is I want to lead us to top 10. We have too good of a state to be where we're at. And so I am so excited to lead us because I think we can be top 10 in growth, top 10 in education, top 10 in infrastructure. But I need your help on June 26th. We're now starting to poll in the lead. Go to stitforgovernor.com. Make sure you tell all your friends about us and get the vote out on June 26th. So thank you all for being here.
Kevin Stitt, Gary Jones, thank you for your time. Best of luck with your campaign in the next 2 weeks. Thank you.